Hello. All right. Good morning, everyone. Once again, welcome to the Flourish Academy Psychedelics. Today's room is Entheogens and the Divine Masculine, and we're going to be talking about healing. Well, we're going to be discussing the importance of group men's work and how we can really, as men, open our hearts and heal in community um, from all types of things like shame. Right now in my journey, I am struggling a lot with financial shame, right? Being almost 50 years old and not where I would like to be financially and having to work through a lot of these blocks. It's really heavy right now. Um, but we're also going to be discussing, of course, how psychedelics can aid in that healing process. But before we get into the topic, I just want to go through our disclaimers. Here at the Flourish Academy, we are not licensed medical or mental health professionals. Nothing said in this room is meant to be medical, mental health, financial, business, or legal advice. We don't promote or advocate any illegal activity. In many places, taking or having psychedelics are still illegal, so we're here for education and harm reduction only. This room doesn't tolerate any sourcing of substances. We will not guide anyone where to get medicines, nor will we tolerate people offering medicines. We are honored to have many world-class experts and guests like Peg Peters join us in our rooms for deep dives into specific and sometimes controversial topics. We're proud to create a forum for these conversations. However, hosting a guest does not necessarily imply that we endorse their viewpoints. The Flourish Academy is a safe space free of judgment. We're a community and a family that supports and encourages each other. With that in mind, please keep your shares respectful and also respectful of time. We try to allow time for everyone on stage to share within the 90 minutes of our room. Please also note that these rooms are recorded when we have guest speakers, and they may be shared outside of Clubhouse. So if you do make a choice to join us on stage, you are implicitly agreeing to be recorded. To ensure an open, safe, and comfortable space for all our community members to have the freedom to share, we will not be recording or sharing our share and care rooms going forward. All right, finally, before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the shoulders upon which we stand. I invite everyone to take a deep breath in with me and exhale with a sigh. We are grateful to Mother Earth, who holds us in the belly of her womb, who gifts us with sacred plant medicines to heal, to expand our consciousness, and to grow. We're grateful to our ancestors to our elders, to those who have come before us, and to the indigenous people of all of our lands who have, over time, shared the beauty and the mystery of these plants with us. All right, now let me introduce Peg. For those of you who don't know, Peg Peters is a storyteller, an ordained minister, and a documentary filmmaker. Peg, I didn't know this about you. I didn't know that you produced those two. He's also an author, and Peg explores diverse perspectives on spirituality and philosophy, a theme that underpins his approach to understanding and nurturing human connection on his podcast, Unveiled. And now, as the CEO of Gathering Groups, he blends all of his experiences to tackle the crisis of isolation and loneliness. Peg facilitates healing and growth through small group connection in a space where we can be accepted fully and feel seen and known. So welcome. Welcome back to the Flourish Academy.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Danny?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Good job. Well, hey, thanks for that introduction. I'm really excited about this opportunity to have a great discussion around group work, spirituality, plant medicines, and connecting with kind of the divine masculine inside of us as men. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. Thanks a lot for having me, Danny.
Yeah, of course. I was so excited when Dana suggested you as a guest for this week.
Hmm.
We've had this discussion before. I am such a big fan of men's work, and honestly, right now in this period of my life, I feel very disconnected from men's community. I'm in a group chat with my men's group, but I have not been to a meeting or a group in, God, it's probably been like a year now.
Hmm.
And I'm really having some deep struggles with this financial piece that I had mentioned before. And, that's really especially in the US, I don't know if it's like this in Canada, but masculinity is so tied to, being the concept of being a financial provider.
Wow.
And as I'm like I'm almost 50 and my birthday's in just a few weeks, and I
Mhm.
feel like I'm not where I want to be financially, and I'm having a lot of shame and insecurity around all of this.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Oh man, Danny, like I can just hear in your heart such an authentic approach. I mean, you are rightly naming one of the biggest things that is disconnecting men in our modern world, and I'd love to dive into that because it's this. There's this. I came across this book really recently by this incredible leader. Her name is Tricia Hersey, and the book is called "Rest is Resistance." It's a manifesto. She is this incredibly fiery black feminist leader in the deep south, and she's really tackling this issue of what she calls grind culture, hustle culture. This idea that white supremacy has teamed up with capitalism to make us feel disconnected and make us feel like we're never enough. And she really gets into this issue of like we've got to be busier. We kind of mark our kind of success by finance, by how much money we have, by how much we've accomplished, by how busy we are. Almost like busyness becomes an act of like our greatness in our modern culture. And this robs us of who we are as human beings. And I think men have become enslaved by this system. And when we get enslaved by capitalism, by this model that my success and my value is determined by how much money I have or how much success I have. This is one of the deepest cultural shifts that needs to happen inside for men because what you just said, Danny, which is I feel shame that in my 50s I don't have, what I really thought I should have. And that word should, that's a lie. That's a lie that our culture has given us as men, and we disconnect from each other because of this. I know exactly what you're feeling, Danny. Like I I struggled my entire life around money, feeling like with my friends that were business people that I was never enough. I was involved in the nonprofit world. I was involved in like, ministry work and these kinds of things. And I didn't own property. I was a renter. I'm raising four kids, always struggling. And so I know that real sense of I'm not enough. I'm not enough for culture. I'm not enough for my family. And so when you feel that, man, you want to pull away. You want to say, I can't be, I feel shame. Shame isolates us, right? So, Danny, I just like, what a beautiful opening line that you just said. You know what? We're going to talk about this as men, and we're not going to be scared away from one of these big issues around money and masculinity. And so I don't know. I'm just amazed that this is where you're starting, Danny. So thank you for that opening, authentic, gate that you just opened for us to kind of lean into.
Yeah, of course. Honestly, I've just been feeling it so tremendously heavily. And when Dana suggested you for the guest this week, I was like, okay, this is perfectly timed. Yeah, that shame honestly has been keeping me from even reaching out to my men's group. I feel embarrassed, and I know I don't have to be. I know that they'll welcome me and they'll hold me up, but
Mm,
there's just some block inside of me that I feel embarrassed to even reach out for help. So I'm almost just kind of like saying this as soon as we started into the room, just to get it out there so that I have the
yeah.
accountability to move forward with it.
Oh man, Danny, like I just what a gift that you actually have a group that you could reach out to, right? Like thousands of men don't even know where to start. They feel alone. They feel this pressure. They're getting up in the morning doing the best they can to grind it out, and they're working 60 plus hours a week, barely being able to make their payments on their mortgages or their rent, and feeling like I'm coming home at 5 or 6, I'm exhausted, and I have to give back to my kids and family or whatever, and I got nothing. And I just feel like there's this such a toxic, a toxic thing going on in our culture when it comes to this idea of busyness and hustle culture and what we call grind culture. And I think this is such an important place to start because we can't talk about our enoughness or our connection or our value as human beings when we're stuck in the swamp of, you know what, I'm not enough because the whole world tells me I'm not enough. And so I come home in my marriage and I don't feel like I'm enough. And I don't feel like I'm enough as a father. I don't feel like I'm enough as a provider. And so that just shrinks us up more and more, and we get into this perpetual cycle. And then men turn to these really easy addictive areas where we can kind of disconnect and dissociate from those feelings, right? So we go into pornography. We go into these areas where doom scrolling or video games or whatever sports, these become opportunities for us to disengage from our what we're really feeling inside, this loneliness, this isolation, and we don't know how to handle that, so we just push it away and we numb it with alcohol and more busyness. And I just feel such a deep, I have a clarity. I've been working with men for over 30 years, and I know these cycles of shame and loneliness, and I know the answer, which is connection and community. And it's men circling up together, looking each other in the eye and saying, I don't feel like I'm enough. I feel shame. And in that moment, we create a container that can handle that. And other men look at you and say, I've got you, brother. I know what you're feeling. You are enough. You are beautiful the way you are, And so it's in that, that's what we're missing in our culture. We no longer have these circles that we can turn to as men. We no longer have, spiritual communities no longer feel like they are safe places. I grew up as in a Christian community, wanted to be a pastor because I really wanted people to feel loved. And so I became a pastor and realized that the system I was in continued to reinforce shame for men. That the system that I was trying to break was actually it was going against the tide, and I was losing ground as a minister, trying to help men free from sexual shame, from addiction, from isolation. And so those communities I have to walk away from because they were doing more damage than good. So where do men find connection anymore? And it can't just be, oh, I've got a couple buddies that I go to the bar with and watch a hockey game or we bet on football. That's not what we're longing for. We're longing to be known, to be held, to allow our open heart to be able to be seen by others. And so I have this passion to build communities that actually can hold men and allow them to feel seen in a real in a container that we can create together. So that's kind of my passion, and love to dive into what that looks like.
My goodness, I can hear your passion. It's like fire coming over the airwaves right now. So thank
Mhm.
you. And, I do feel seen. Some of the things that you just said, video games, cannabis, I have been finding I had to take a break from cannabis because I found that I was using it to numb.
Mhm.
So over the last week or two, I had to stop using cannabis altogether,
Mm.
which can, of course, be a beautiful medicine. But if the
Yeah.
intention is to escape, a friend of mine likes to use the phrase "enhance, don't escape." Right. So even with
Mm.
psychedelic medicines, that can
Yeah.
be beautiful. Sometimes we may have the temptation to want to escape what we're feeling through use of
Mm.
psychedelics, even.
Oh,
Um, you
beautiful.
know, I
Let's dive into that for a second, Danny, because I think again,
Sure.
you are dropping wisdom bombs right now. Like this, you're you're rightly understanding this need to feel more, not to feel less, right? And I think what I'm finding is that the answer is to feel more embodied, to get back into our bodies, not in our heads. Our heads lie to us and tell this story that we've been fed by capitalism and white supremacy, that that we're only good as machines in a work system, right? Like I just got to grind it out like this kind of like the matrix, right? Like I've said yes to like this capitalist system that exploits labor, and it kind of promises you some kind of false freedom. And so I've just said, I guess I got to give 70 hours a week to this machine that makes me feel disconnected. And yet you are rightly saying, what if our answer is to feel more, not to feel less? Like alcohol suppresses, right? And cannabis has two gears, right? It can suppress, but it also can open us up. And it's how we use it. And what I'm finding with cannabis is that if we can use it in men's circles with intentionality and with meditation, that we can actually bring men together and say, okay, we are going to use cannabis ceremonially together. We're going to do it in a particular way with intentionality, like any other medicine. But we're going to do this as a group of men. And the goal tonight is going to be feeling more, feeling that isolation, feeling that loneliness, feeling it more so that we can allow it to go through us. And that might mean I got to weep. I got to weep for how, the shame I feel, or for the debt that I'm in, or for the marriage that I'm losing, for my disconnection. Like there's this author that for me has been like probably one of the better guides for me in kind of this work. And this he's not into psychedelics per se, but he's just got this beautiful way of framing what the issues are going on. And his name is Francis Weller, and the book is called The Wild Edge of Sorrow: Rituals of Renewal and the Sacred Work of Grief. And what Francis Weller does so well, particularly for men, I mean, it's not a men's book, but he really gets into, if you want to heal, you've got to take good stock of where you're at in this moment and then feel those feelings. This isn't about, wishing for a better future or having regret from the past. This is about taking an honest somatic stock of what's going on in my body right now and how do I feel that fully. And in order to do that, I've got to go, okay, where am I at? Where is my am I in a loving relationship? And how am I with my children, with my family, with my parents? What's going on in the relationality of my life? And then what are the appropriate emotions that I need to experience as an opportunity to let me feel it fully so I can move forward, right? We want to skip that part of it. We want to skip the feelings of loss, of grief. And so he gives all these different ways of, why a ritual in community is really the way forward for us as men. We need these ritualized containers. Human beings have for 100,000 years, we are social creatures. We have not existed as a species because we're so strong individually. We're not. We're not stronger than the big apes, right? And it's not just because we're so smart. It's because we are compassionate and we have the ability to share and build community with one another. That's what stood us apart as a species. And we've lost that in the West. We've lost the ability to circle up around a fire and be seen, known, and heard in ceremonial ritual ways. And so Francis Weller in his book talks about the purpose of ritual, talks about how to create rituals in our communities around grief, because grief is the starting place for healing. This is where we all start, right? My indigenous friend named Winchester, he always says, he's from the Stolo First Nation here in BC. And he says, in the indigenous worldview, we start in the darkness, we start in winter. And then we move to spring and then summer and then fall. And in that cycle is kind of, we start in the darkness and we have to have this letting go, this grief of winter needs to start us. We need to feel those feelings. And then we take a breath in and it's like spring. We take in life, we take in spirit, and then that's the possibility. But everything must start in this kind of this place of grief and letting go. And I think for men to heal, we need to find community. We need to be able to be, we need to connect with our bodies. We need to feel our emotions, and we need to have ritualized containers in which to do this work, because just hanging out with a bunch of buddies is not going to accomplish anything. I've done that for 30 years. Nothing happens. You sit around at a bar, you just kind of chat about stories, and guys one up each other, and it's not connection. You need a ritual container that has a beginning, it has a ritual you follow, it has structure, order, and it has a way to close the container. Without ritual, you will not heal. I'm just going to say it, that's how strong I feel about this. And ritual happens in a container that you co-create with other human beings. So I'll just kind of stop there and let you respond, Danny. But I just think that you're onto something really important here. This longing to be seen by other men, but there's this fear of shame that holds you back from really being known. And so that longing is, there's thousands of men that have that, and there's ways for us to start building containers together.
Yeah, I've just really been trying to ground into everything you're saying. I mean, none of this is new. My intuition has been like trying so hard to get through to me the last couple of weeks. I
Mm,
think for me personally, um, I'm not necessarily afraid to feel. It's almost like I'm stuck in the feeling and I
mm,
can't move through it to take the action, right?
mm,
So I've kind of been sitting in this depressed place, and Wendy and Dana both have, and of course my wife have all been holding space for me.
mm,
And I think I feel safer with the feminine space,
mm-hmm. Yep.
or there's
Yep.
something like blocking me from taking that, because then I know maybe I'll have to take action, or I don't know exactly what it is.
Mm,
But I'm stuck in the place of feeling, and I'm not able to take action. I know I need to get into somatics. I know I need to
mhm,
start my exercise routine again, but I just can't bring myself to get out of bed in the
mhm.
morning to do it. Like
Yeah.
all of these things that I know I need to take action on, and I just
Mm,
find myself like stuck in this quagmire of emotion.
mhm.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you just even in this process, in this moment, Danny, I feel a sacred connection with you, because you are, rather than just doing an interview on a podcast right now, you're dropping into your heart space with me and with everyone on this call. And that to me is the first act of defiance against this culture, right? You are standing and saying, I will be known. I want my feelings to be felt. I'm going to voice them. And so just in this small act, in this moment, Danny, I honor your passion to be known and to get unstuck. And by verbalizing it, by putting it out there into a community, like even in this Clubhouse moment, you are you are defying the culture that says, no, we are going to separate you from everybody else. We're going to isolate you. We are going to make you only think about how much you have and how much you don't have, and then kind of diminish you and make you kind of continue to be a slave to this cycle. And so your voice is a voice of resistance right now. You're saying, no, I don't take this life as this is all I've got, is to be stuck and in fear and in a sense of shame and isolation, and then I'm not enough. We can claim our birthright as these divine beings and saying, no, I want to be seen and known. This is this culture that wants to destroy me and isolate me and say that my only value is what I can contribute financially to the growing GDP of my country. That is the biggest pile of horseshit I've ever heard, and it destroys human beings. And so your value is nothing to do with that, right? So I just love that you are radically pushing against that and saying my first step of toward freedom is by acknowledging with other people. And that is the, that's the passion of, that's the power of letting shame kind of dissipate, is by bringing it into the open, into the light. And I just want to affirm you as a beautiful leader right now, Danny, in doing this work live with me. And my heart is just, yeah, I'm amazed at you actually. Like, very few men can do what you just did. Publicly admit, I'm not doing well. I need help. And I feel safer with the divine feminine, surrounding me than I do with men. Because men shame, men, banter, and they use kind of their voice as a way to protect and armor up with each other. And you're like, it's toxic for me. Men have become very toxic in our culture with each other. And yet there's enough of us that are saying, I don't want what my parents had. I don't want the isolation at 85 to not have male friends in my life, right? I mean, this is what's happening with so many men. My dad is still alive, and we talk about these issues, and he says, Peg, like, I wish I had male friends like you. You've cultivated an ability to be intimate and deep with men in your life, Peg. I don't have that, you know he just said we just worked our butt off and had to kind of save and raise kids, but we are not known. And I'm in my 80s now, and I wish I had men that knew me. And that's a tragedy, right? At the end of your life, where you don't have connection. So you and I are the next generation, this kind of Gen X generation, and saying that's not enough. This is wrong. We as men are need to be known and heard and seen from by each other. And there's a different way of being with one another, one that maybe is more tender, one that maybe holds space for emotions, right? I heard someone say once that the emasculation of men has happened by disconnecting us with our ability to feel emotion. It's like the only emotion that we've been allowed to have is like anger, right? It's like you can be mad as a man, and it's like, I'm going to kick some butt and be violent and aggressive. And that seems like, oh, that's just men, right? Like, that's terrible. But we can't feel emotions like longing or tenderness or loneliness, right? Those become diminished. And when we say it, oh, you're tapping into this weak part of you. And I'm like, no, do not let this culture say as a human being that there's only two emotions you get to feel. You get to have the full spectrum of emotions, and they're all important to feel as a man. And so I just want to honor you in this moment, Danny, as a real leader, demonstrating what it is to be known, what it is to share your true feelings, even in this moment. And I'll tell you what happened inside of me as you were talking, Danny. I just felt like this, like like my whole rib cage kind of started to collapse, and I had this kind of, my arms came in front of me, and almost like this need to protect my own heart. That's how it felt as you were talking, because I could just feel that aching inside of you. And so I just felt that in my heart as I listened to you, Danny. And I just want to say thank you for being so vulnerable.
Pegs, thank you so much for acknowledging all of that. And, as you're saying that and describing how you felt, I'm noticing that my posture, my shoulders are hunched forward and my arms are in a way where I am also like, I have my posture is like protecting my heart as well.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. Whew.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
how do we open those up, right? How do we open our heart up to one another?
How do we
So
move into an embodiment space? Please,
yeah.
I got to get out of my head.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And I think that's and what a great, what a great next question, because I think I think that's really the kind of the answer to kind of this men's work. I mean, all of this work, but we're talking about men's work right now. I think men have been, the only place that we've been allowed to exist is in our heads, and then what happens with that is that this monkey mind begins to spin and make up lies about ourselves over and over and over. And we have this spinning mind, and we have to then fill it with more activity, more busyness. We need more podcasts, more shows, more Netflix, more porn streaming on our phones. We just need more and more and more, because that's this busy mind. Our freedom is going to be found by getting out of our heads and into this body, right? Like going back to my friend Winchester, he's really a guide for me. He says in the indigenous worldview, it's that you're first spirit, then you are a body, then you are emotions, and then lastly you're a mind. The mind is the bottom. It's the dumb one that needs to be first understood, that you are spirit, which means you are infinite, that you have access to the divine right inside of you. And the way to that is through the body and through the emotions. And so the practice of embodiment is, first of all with our breath, right? So it's this invitation into the practice of breathing, to deepening our breath. I mean, you started this call so beautifully by inviting us all to take a deep breath into our belly, to be able to be out of our heads into the moment. Our breath is our gift. And most of us take shallow breaths, thousands of shallow, panicky breaths our whole day. And then we're exhausted at the end of the day. We haven't got any deep breathing. We haven't had maybe 5 minutes to stop, to try to slow our mind down. And the only way to do that is by breath and meditation. And that practice of like quietness is so hard for many of us, because for me, I have ADHD. And the thought of like doing meditation is like, that's a nightmare for me. If I sit in quiet, all I have is my mind going 1,000 miles an hour, a million ideas and thoughts and fears and insecurities just all flood to me at once. And so for me, plant medicine, when I first did my first psychedelic high dose psilocybin experience with two therapists, it was a 6 gram a trip with two therapists. And it was the first time, I think it was 2017. I was new. I'm new to psychedelics. Like I've been doing other modalities throughout my life, but when I encountered plant medicine, that was the first time that my monkey mind quieted, and I could actually feel connection to spirit. Can you imagine me as a minister trying to pray and trying to lead people when I feel like I had no connection to the divine. All I had was my monkey mind spinning. And it wasn't until psychedelics that I actually had a true encounter with the divine for the first time in my life. And it quieted my mind enough that I could realize, whoa, there's space inside here. There's quietness in here. And it lasted 4 or 5 hours on my experience. But as I was coming out, what I recognized was that there was gaps, that I could find ways of accessing that quietness on a daily basis, and begin to start a daily practice of meditation now, because I knew somatically what it felt like to have the quietness in my mind. And so I began to find tools of meditation, of breath work, of cold plunging, of using exercise to elevate my heart rate and then to bring it down by breath work, and began to use somatic practices as a way to kind of go back to those quiet moments that I experienced inside of my psychedelic trip. So I think plant medicine is an incredibly helpful tool at giving people an experience of quiet inside, an experience of enoughness, an experience of their own divinity, so that they can now go back and use practices, disciplines of throughout their day to be able to tap back into that space. So, I mean, that's a first start. But this conversation about embodiment, Danny, I think is a really, really important one. And so, if we start with breath, and then we start with body. So, what are the activities? If I need to learn to breathe better, I need to learn to work with the signals my body is telling me more, right? What's the conversation my body is wanting to have with me? I mean, that's an interesting question, right? If you take stock right now, Danny, what do you think your body, if you were to have a conversation with your body right now and just say, okay, what do you need from me? What do you need me to hear? What do you think it would say right now, Danny?
It's been telling me movement. That's what
Mm,
it's been telling me. For weeks, it's been telling me movement.
wow. Yeah. 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 It longs to move, and so imagine if you had, 4 or 5 guys in a group that met every week with a structured 90-minute practice. And that part of that 90-minute practice was online, so you can do it anywhere in the world. But part of that practice was breath work. Part of that practice was learning to tap into the body. Part of that practice was learning to navigate and feel your emotions with other men. And then part of that practice was encouraging each other throughout the week to move, and then to report back and say, hey, how did you move this week? How did you find embodiment this week? How did you find your breath this week? Right? And so that to me is kind of a practice that we need to get back into as men, right? This a circle where we can feel safe. You know, we call it in our practice and gathering, it's all based on unconditional positive regard. This is a Carl Rogers word. And what it means is that we create a safe container where the only thing that's going to happen in this is unconditional love for each other. There's no therapizing, there's no judgment, there's no advice giving to other men. We are so addicted as men to giving advice because we want to put our place in a place of power over each other. And so, oh, I've got the answers, right? How many of our partners have said, honey, I don't need your advice. I don't need your answer. I need you to sit in the uncomfort of feeling these feelings with me. That's what we need. And we practice this in a gathering circle of holding the space for uncomfortable emotions to be present without any desire to fix, solve, or give advice. And so that practice of doing that weekly for 90 minutes really encourages men to get back into their body, to find practices that they can be accountable to other men for. So I love that you're listening to your body and your body's telling you to move. And I just feel like if we're alone in this practice, it won't happen. You need other men in a sense to encourage you so that you can feel a sense of camaraderie. There's a reason why, why the army, why all these first responder, systems use groups of men, because we know that we operate best in teams. The power of team sports in its best, like it can be really bad for some guys, as they feel left out and not picked. But the beauty of team is that you feel like you belong, that you are a welcome member of a team accomplishing something. Well, this is the same kind of vibe that you can feel in a men's group. And what I love in the groups that we form is that we try to make them as diverse as possible. So we're not trying to get, how do I get, 7 35-year-old men that are all white, cis, gendered kind of men. No, I want diverse men. I want men in their 70s and 80s and 20s and 40s, all the way through in different stages of life, because they have different wisdom to share. And so these groups become these incredible places of connection for men. And the groups that we run, and then we bring them into retreat. Like we work for 12 weeks together, 8 weeks preparing to feel emotion, to feel seen and loved, to create this safe container. And then they come to a retreat, and we are held by women. Women serve the medicine. This is a really important part, and goes back to this idea, this ancient idea that the women are medicine keepers, that the women are the ones that serve the Eucharist, the entheogen Eucharist in the Christian community. For 380 years, women served the Eucharist. This is the body of God. Take it in. You are divine. Women would say that to men, and men would submit to women in that process. We've lost that. The patriarchy took over in 383. Emperor Theodosius outlawed women serving the Eucharist and outlawed the psychedelic wine that was being used for 300 years as a way for the Christian people to actually experience the divine. And that was called pagan. If it was psychedelic and women served it, it was called pagan, and they destroyed all those temples and all those places. And instead, it had to be a male priest who he was the only one who had access to the divine. And that's where to me, this patriarchal notion came about. So I just see the power of these groups coming into these retreats, feeling safe and held and loved. And then we integrate these divine experiences that we have as groups of men, the healing that happens on these retreats, and then the integration that happens after. And it's not like a one and done fix all. It's this group work is an invitation to a lifetime. This is a way to be with one another, to get out of our isolation, our individualism, and to begin to say, I've got to be seen and known by others. And if I'm not, I will not survive this capitalist system. It will destroy me and isolate me and hive me off as an individual that is it's only good for the capitalist system. And that's what's destroying us. I feel pretty passionate about this stuff.
Oh my goodness. I'm just thinking you're in such flow state. Yeah, I'm just like bathing in the energy that you're putting out. Thank you so much for all of that. Don't you have a men's gathering group starting up soon?
Yeah, we do. And if people are interested, we've got a few more spots. The best thing to do is go to gatheringgroups.ca and just hit apply. It's free, no obligation to put money down. You get your application in. We go through a really like our number one value is safety. So you're screened by a nurse, then you're screened by a therapist. And this is not about excluding you. This is about helping you. We create an individualized plan with you to say, okay, what are the issues you really want to work on? What are the medications you're on? What are the history you have with mental illness maybe in your family? What do we need to be aware of so that we can make sure this entire project, this group work and this medicine experience is really safe for you. So once you're screened and we kind of understand what we kind of create that plan for you, then we say, okay, here's some of our offerings. We try to launch about 2 groups a month. We typically most of our work, about 80% of our groups are women's groups. This work of looking inside is more feminine in nature in our culture. The men that step into this are leaders right now. These are men that are saying, you know what? I'm not buying this patriarchal culture anymore. I want to heal. I want to be known. I want to be embodied. And so, we have 20% of our groups are men's groups. We do have co-ed groups, which I think are brilliant as well. But our men's groups that do form are really powerful. And I want to invite men into this. So yes, I'm leading a men's group that's starting up here in April. So we've got about 2 to 3 more weeks where we're taking in applications. But if you apply and you put in there, hey, I'm interested in a men's group, I will personally email you and connect with you. I would love to chat with you on a Zoom call to hear, say, I heard you on this podcast or on this Clubhouse, and Peg, I'd love to be in a men's group with you, because I would love that. I love leading men through this process, and I've got actually one of my buddies who's been through a men's group is in the room right now. His name's Brandon, and he's just a deep, beautiful soul. And so a big shout out to Brandon, who knows the power of these kind of these men's communities. And so maybe later, if he's interested, we can try to get him on here and get his thoughts on what this experience has been like. But yeah, so please sign up. Go to gatheringgroups.ca. We'd love to love to have you in a men's group and walk you through our process of how we work. We work in those 4 quadrants, right? Just like I said, we start with spirit and we teach you how to use the breath to access spirit. And then we work with the body and we teach you embodiment practices about getting out of your head and into the body. What's your body? Where do you hold your tightness? Where do you hold your trauma, right? For me, I hold it in my jaw. This is where I tense up. This is where I feel it, right? And for me, it's connected to a story when I was a child. I was in a Sunday school class as a kid. I was 8 years old, and the teacher was trying to tell a story that I knew. They was reading it out of some King James Bible, and I stood up on my chair because it was a beautiful story. I knew about Jesus, and so I started telling the story, and I was animated just like I am now. And just imagine me as an ADHD 8-year-old, all excited about a story. Stood up on my chair, and I was telling this story, and all my little friends were animated and excited. And all of a sudden, I didn't know, but the teacher was yelling at me to stop, and didn't hear it. You got to sit down. You got to sit. And all of a sudden, this huge hand came up and whacked me across the face as hard as he could, took me to the ground, fell down, crumpled as a little 8-year-old, bawling my eyes out, embarrassed in front of all these boys. And the teacher just said, you are disrespecting God. I was reading the Bible and all this shame hit me. And ever since then, my jaw hurts when I feel tension, and the emotions that are connected to my stress are feelings that I will be in trouble and that I'll be left out. What a weird thing. My stress tells me those stories. My stress, when my jaw tenses up, with the feelings I actually feel are not stress. They're feelings that I'll be left out and that I'll be somehow shamed, and I'm in trouble. And so we teach these practices of learning the stories of where we hold our trauma and how do we soften around that. And then we move into emotions. And we teach men how to feel their emotions, sometimes for the first time, deep emotions without trying to run away from these big ones. And we create a container with other men to be able to feel these emotions and to sit with one another's fears, insecurities, a shame. And then lastly, we start talking about truth and the mind. And the last part, we say, okay, what are the truths? What are the mantras that we need to begin to root ourselves back into? Statements like, I'm enough, I am worthy, I am divine, I have everything I need. Life is for me. The universe is for me, right? These are these are truths, but you can't get to those truths without going through spirit, body, and emotion. You can't get to that truth. We want to flip it on its head and we want to start with kind of, cognitive changes. Nope. The day of cognitive intervention is over. We need an embodiment, we need emotion, and we need spirit now. And so that's the process we work through with these men, giving them the tools to get ready for a big medicine experience, a healing experience. We have two facilitators, usually in a group of about 6 to 8 men, and then we come in, we bring in kind of women space holders to be able to bring that divine feminine healing, experience in a group container where all of us are in a circle doing medicine with our heads together in a beautiful container, and then we have dinner together, and we spend the evening at our retreat center here integrating, doing a cold plunge, hot tub, getting into our body, feeling one another, and then our last day we have breakfast together, circle up again as men, and then we leave. So it's this 3-day retreat experience, and then 4 weeks of integrating after. So that's kind of our 12-week model with gathering groups, and I found it to be a really powerful tool for men to find connection, healing, and growth.
Wow, that sounds so incredible. I really love all of it. And
Mm,
while you were telling that story about Sunday school, I carry my stress in my shoulder. And while you were telling that story, I had this memory of my uncle. He was drunk and he was chasing me. And I don't remember what I said to him, or maybe I made a smart ass comment or what, but I must have been about 11 years old. And he was drunk and he punched me the way you would punch a man, right in my shoulder. And I just realized, like, wow, I wonder if that's some kind of connection there. When I get stressed, like that, it's almost like a lion chasing a gazelle, right? This
yeah.
this 50-year-old drunk man chasing an 11-year-old kid and then hitting him like an adult.
Oh
Wow,
my God.
that's
Danny,
incredible. I'm
that's
gonna have to
that's
do some
that's an
integration
amazing
there.
that came up for you is really important. Like the fact that that story came up for you as a somatic memory is really important. You need to write that down and you need to go back into that experience. Your body gave you a gift just now, and there's an opportunity to work with that as a starting place. I call it breadcrumbs. It's like Hansel and Gretel lost in the woods, and they're like, how do I get back home? They left breadcrumbs. Our body leaves breadcrumbs for us to come back to our heart. So this is a breadcrumb moment where you can say, oh, there's something here. My body just gave me a story. I need to go back into that and feel for that 11-year-old boy how terrifying that would be to have an out of control adult male that's supposed to be safe instead become a terrorizing predator, chasing me with drunk anger and hitting me like I was a grown man in a fight, and you're 11-year-old. That's horrific, Danny. And that feeling for that 11-year-old little boy, man, I just want to pick up that little 11-year-old boy and say that never should have happened to you. That is never okay, and that must have been really scary. And for you to bring some tenderness and love to that 11-year-old boy in this moment, even to say, oh, buddy, it's going to be okay. I got you. That never should have happened to you. That's the starting place of tenderness inside. You've got a beautiful access there, Danny, of where you can start bringing love to that little boy that felt so lost and so scared.
And just breathing through that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whew. This room is fire today. Well, I want to open it up, and if there's anyone in the audience that wants to come up, if you have any questions or reflections on what Peg has been sharing, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll bring you up to the stage. Brandon, if you want to come up and talk about your experience with gathering groups, that would be beautiful to have a testimonial. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Brandon might be driving and busy, but oh, he's up. He's in. Yes, go for it. I think Brandon just joined the stage.
Oh wow! It took me a minute. This is my first time on this app. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, cool. I'm also at work, so
You're just going in and out of cell range there, but
uh,
why don't you try it?
can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Hey, this is really awesome. And Danny, what you said is 100% truth. This is fire. Every piece of it is just like rattling me in my core. um, yeah, I was able to experience a gathering group, and in a really beautiful way. I joined kind of a group unknowingly, which turned out to it was sort of marketed as a co-ed group, but I was the only male in it, and that was such a unique experience that was so loaded with a ton of energy. I grew up as the only boy in a family of girls. Also grew up in a sort of Christian environment that was very, very feminine. But I had a very, uh, yeah, a very unavailable father, and not a great, um, I guess, example or imprinting of positive masculine energy. So was always finding myself in situations that were largely with females, and this group was such a unique experience of sort of being oh, I feel emotional talking about it, but sort of being like reparented by these incredible women who sort of welcomed me into these really intimate and really big energetic spaces. It felt like an honor, such an honor to be allowed to heal alongside these women, and also at the same time, a lot of these women, their wounding was because of terrible men in their lives who caused a ton of pain. So there was this really unique, and I say unique because it was also difficult at times to be sort of the representation of male in this group, but being allowed to sit with these emotions with these women and heal alongside them was a gift I will never forget. And the gathering group was my uh, kind of second psychedelic experience. And my first experience, maybe this resonates with others, was largely like, out of interest. I had a therapist. It was an experience that I did with my therapist when I was sitting. Super important. It's super dynamic. um, but having the experience in a community of people was just so aligned with what I believe this work, the power of this work is. What you sort of alluded to, Peg, was in connection and in community, and being able to engage in these deep spaces, alongside others who are also engaged in deep energetic space, and the way that those stories start intersecting in sort of this universal cosmic way was you know, again, like I get goosebumps talking about it because it just like feels like it's like reverberating at the core of our existence, where it's like even our spirit wants to connect. Even in an altered state, my spirit is leaning towards the other. Like, this is not work for the individual, I believe. This is work for the community. And in that space of gathering, in sort of the container of safety, it was just something that I'll never forget. So when you guys are talking about where you hold shame, um, it's amazing what happens in your body when you hear other people talk about shame, because I mean, we're no strangers to shame, and all of a sudden your body starts firing up. But I feel it a lot in my chest, and also in this is weird, but in my thumb. And I actually cut off one of my thumbs with a saw. That's another story for another time. But like, so connected to stories. And then when you guys talked about leaning toward the story and sort of restorying, yeah, it just got me really, really excited. So thanks so much for your shares, Peg, and for Danny. This was more than I thought I was going to get this morning tapping in. So yeah, thank you.
Mm. Brandon, I just want to honor your risking by coming on here and sharing some of your truth. I love your framing of this as community work. This is not about how do I just heal personally as a man. This is about how do I heal collectively, because we are a collection of parts, right? To use internal family systems language, that we have all these little parts inside of us. So we are a little community. So we need to bring our little community in connection with other little communities, right? Other men, other people in a circle. We are not lone individuals. We need to heal together, and I think that is such a huge shift that needs to happen in our world, moving beyond the individual and all of the individual pursuits that we've been told. Right? I mean, just meditate, be quiet, go for doing this and this. No, that's not going to work. That's none of those interventions are going to work. We need each other. We need structured, ritualized spaces in order to heal. And I that I'm learning so profoundly from my indigenous brothers and sisters. What they have is, and we tried to, like, Canadian government tried to kill the Indian. That was a policy. How do we get the Indian out of them? Like, that's what we took away their language, which was their connection to their body, because their language system, the Hulkamalum language of the Stolo people, is a language of action, and it sees the entire universe as alive. The river's live with spirit. The tree is alive with spirit. And so we take away their language, which is their connection to spirit, and then we put them in residential schools, and we make them, we take them out of their connection to family. And so that's the process, this dehumanizing process that Western culture has done. But what I've learned from indigenous cultures is that you need structured, ceremonial, ritualized spaces. It will not happen. And this is, if there's one thing I'm going to leave with man right now, you might leave this call and go, "Oh, that's really cool. I kind of like, yeah, they're telling some good stuff." If you don't find yourself in a structured, ritualized container somewhere, this won't happen. This doesn't happen by doing a book club. This doesn't happen by just getting together and talking about a movie. You know, you need structured, ritualized spaces. And that's a very, very different thing than just getting together at a bar. You need a place where you can say, the goal of this next 90 minutes is to reveal our hearts with one another. And so here's how we're going to do it. We've got a structure, we've got a timed share. You're going to share for 3 minutes, and then there's going to be a timer so everyone gets to share. And here's how we're going to respond to one another. We're not going to give advice. We're not going to do this. We're going to feel with our bodies what's happening in the moment, and we're going to share that. And so we have these structured spaces, and that's what we need right now. Structured, ritualized spaces to find connection, healing, and intimacy with one another. And then adding plant medicine to that, wow, that just takes it to another level. But plant medicine isn't the only way to experience this. Connecting in groups of men and doing breath work together, or connecting in groups of men and doing a practice of maybe a ritual around a fire, right? You could say, hey, we want to get together weekly and then have once a month time where we can go out into the woods and have a fire together as men and have a certain ritual of letting go or of shedding, where we write something down in our life that we no longer want to hold on to, and we share it with the group of men, and we crumple it up and put it in the fire. And in that ritual of letting it go and letting the fire transmute it and bring it up to spirit, like that's what fire always is, right? It's incense, it's fire, it's an alchemy that translates our fears and our shames and what we write, and it translates it up to spirit. We need those kind of embodied experiences, right? Of 8 guys going up on a hike and creating a circle and then jumping into a lake together and saying, hey, we are going to feel the presence of the cold in this and be able to sit in the cold together, knowing it's not going to kill us, but we can build resistance up and feel the cold together, right? Those are the kinds of things and experiences we need. So I really want to talk about why a ritualized container is so important for men.
I think this is how we evolved, right? I think first of all, the masculine energy is the energy of containment, of container, right? So it makes perfect sense that we would need that kind of structure and those rituals and healing in community. We're hurt in community. That
Yeah.
story that you told earlier about Sunday school being hurt in front of all those people. Of course, we need to then heal in community as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Starman is here.
Yeah, Mark, what's on your mind, brother?
Oh, hey, how's it going? It's a good conversation, great conversation. Um, let me think it over. I don't know if I'm ready to share anything. I'm multitasking at my job, and but it is a great conversation. I remember, in the '90s there was a effort to launch a men's movement, and there was the book Iron John that was
Yep.
actually very popular. And maybe you can speak a little to that, Peg, about how
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of took off, but then it dropped out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then there was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Iron John is a powerful book, and it launched a bunch of other books around the kind of the divine masculine and these kind of 4 elements of like the warrior, the king, the I forget the four elements of the masculine,
Magician
but
and lover.
there it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Warrior, king, magician, lover.
There it is. Thank you. But Iron John is an old story. It's an old parable, actually, that came that's been part of oral culture, and it's really a story of a young boy finding what it means to be a man. Right? How do we transition from the little boy of it's a king and his and the queen. They have a son, a little boy, and it's a long parable, and I won't get into it, but it's really about this transition between how do we move our from being a boy to a man, that somehow culturally there is a threshold that needs to be crossed, that what it means to become a man is to be accepted into a kind of a community, right? A coming of age ceremony. And we've lost that in our Western culture. We no longer have coming of age ceremonies. We just have, graduate high school, go to, have some kind of hazing ritual at college, and that's destructive and shaming. And I guess let's just get drunk together and score with as many women as we can. I mean, that is so destructive and harsh as a kind of a ritual for men. And so, what if we had coming of age ceremonies for young men? A vision quest where you're out into wilderness, or maybe plant medicine. This is where I think plant medicine is a gift. I think it's coming up and arising right now because there's such a need for kind of an experience that takes you out of this disembodied technological world that we live in, right? We're becoming more and more sucked in by these digital kind of frameworks that disembody us completely. So what if we had, coming of age when a young man turns 18 or 19, that he's part of with his father and other men, a group that would go out into the woods for a 5 day, experience. And maybe he's going to fast for 3 days and be on his own and face the terrors of the forest, right? Because the forest has always been the place where the human has been forced to go into to be able to find yourself. You leave the community to go to the forest so that you find who you really are, right? Find your limitations as a man and recognize there's larger forces at play on this planet, forces of power and love that you can submit to. So what if we had ritualized spaces where you could allow men to feel this transition? And so Iron John and that kind of men's movement, I think they had some really beautiful ideas there. I think that, and my understanding was that we still need the divine feminine to help us feel that completed healing. So we need to bring women into this kind of this healing movement as well, because we won't heal alone as men. We will heal in groups of men that then are tapped into and connected to other feminine forces as well. And so for us at Gathering, this is why our retreats are so important, because it is in these vulnerable moments in the retreat that you are connected and held by powerful, strong women, right? My wife is one of the founders with me of Gathering groups, and we've raised 4 daughters. They're all in their 20s now. They are involved in this Gathering work. They lead and they work with plant medicines and with us. And my wife's a therapist and a teacher, and so when she's in these spaces, there's a strength, there's a mother, kind of a mother strength that she comes in as a matriarch. And I want men to kind of feel that. And I think people like Dana and others are just strong women that men need to be around to feel, that's what it feels like to be kind of have a corrective experience with a strong kind of feminine presence. So I think the men's movement was an important, but I think there's a renewal of it with an inclusion of plant medicine and an inclusion of the divine feminine, to really give it a more of a holistic way of encountering our world. So I'm excited about what we could do now with some of these pieces of community, of men's work, plant medicine. Combining those can be a really healing path for a lot of men.
Peg, I have another question. I mean, running parallel to that, we saw like the Million Man's March, and then
Mm.
we have like, stadiums. We had stadiums filling up with like Christian men
Oh yeah.
shouting and all of this. And then
Oh,
going to
yeah.
what you said, we have today in politics, the far right, we have what were traditional values like honor, justice, you know, honesty, all these things have been swept by the wayside. It's almost looking through a mirror
Mm.
and seeing, I don't know, just
Hmm.
a monstrous deformity of
Hmm.
these values when you consider like their king who is risen, and he represents the antithesis of all of that, and
Hmm.
yet they
Hmm.
rally around him.
I
How do you
know that.
describe this phenomena? And it's great to reach out
Hmm.
to a group of,
Hmm.
willing people who want to join you and heal and evolve. But in the context of this larger picture of this
Hmm. Hmm.
this monstrosity, this deformity of masculinity that is rising before our eyes, hopefully it's just smoke and mirrors that will dissolve and go away. But what do you say to that?
Oh man, you referenced 2 or 3 things that I just gotta like. That was really important what you just said. As I look at the path, I've been to these men's rallies, right? I I was in a stadium with 50,000 men, for something called Promise Keepers, right? It's this evangelical Christian movement, and but what behind that is this opposition to same-sex marriage, a championing of chastity and marital, you have to make a promise with your body, and it's just it reinforces all the things that I'm standing against. It reinforces a patriarchal hierarchy. It reinforces the sense that you are the head of the home, that women need to submit to you. And it's done more damage than almost any other thing. And I've sat in these. I sat there with 50,000 men all chanting about, what it means to be a man. And I think we're seeing now the kind of the downline of that and the rise of this right wing kind of Christian nationalism in the United States, especially, and the sense of we got to take back what's ours. And you're like, what? No. What you are talking about is actually why we are destroyed as men. This is you're getting more disembodied by using religion as a mechanism of control, and by saying that you are here, and women or other people are here. So I'm really reticent about kind of some of these men's movements that have been kind of tapped into kind of religious zeal. I I just watched Dune 2. What a brilliant movie! And one of the ideas in the film that's so powerful is this is the longing for a Messiah, a strong authoritarian figure, to use religion as a mechanism to pull people together so that you can fight your quote enemies, right? And it's a seductive force, using religion and Messiah kind of language, because it sucks people in and now makes them a them and us. We've got to fight the enemy. That just leads to holy war. That just leads to God is on my side and I've got a sword and I'm going to kill you in the name of God because you're wrong and I'm right. That's a re-entrenchment of patriarchy, right? And so what we need is this kind of a new men's movement that is really about tenderness and softness and inclusion, and where we need to find difference together. And so I think there's an opportunity right now to, in this plant medicine revival, this renaissance, that we as a people can begin to see maybe there's something here for us, that the power of plant medicine helps us recognize who we really are, and it helps us remember that we are connected, that we are not alone. And there's something just inherent in the actual kind of the altered state, right? I mean, First Nations people will call this the importance of trance state learning. That's an important part. They use drums and rattles and the longhouse as a way to use movement and music and rhythmic dance as a way to get you out of your normal state of being into an altered state where you can connect with spirit. We need that. That's our birthright as a human. Your birthright is the ability to go into an altered state as a human being, to remember who you really are. And for the last 50 years, that's been against the law. And we've destroyed the drums of our First Nations people. And my friend talks about his grandma, who was a medicine woman, who would use the drum to go into an altered state to help people heal. And those drums were against the law. They were mechanisms of witchcraft, and they hung his grandmother in downtown Chilliwack. That's a town right beside me here. In downtown Five Corners, his grandmother, as a medicine woman, was hung by white people in the 1800s because that was witchcraft. And I'm going, you know what? We need to go back, and we need the drums again to sound. We need our indigenous brothers and sisters to be able to be free to move into these altered states with their longhouse and their drums and their music, because we need it too. We need access to these medicines and these plants and these ways to be able to find who we really are. We've been doing this for 100,000 years, and for the last 50, it's been against the law. And so, you know what, Nixon, in your 1974 making psychedelics against the law, you stopped all the research. This war on drugs bullshit started, and we began to lose our way as a people. And we need these medicines back so we can remember who we really are as men. I'll stop my
Just to play the
soapbox.
dig it. That's a really great statement, but just to play the devil's advocate, if you were one of these demagogues in charge of a group and you had the medicine and you used it, could you just manipulate better and
Mm-hmm.
sway them to your
Yep.
side?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really important piece. I think this is why community is so important. It's not about one individual, the Messiah that we push to the stage and say, you are the be and end all. You're here to rescue us. You're the guru, right? I think the warning in the psychedelic community is the rise of gurus, the rise of the special one. I've got the wisdom, you know. Please don't look to Peg as some guru. No. I'm just a dad trying to make it through, trying to keep my marriage strong, trying to work through my insecurities around money and business. I'm no, you know, don't look to me, look to the community. Let the community be the one that helps us understand the insights that we're getting. You are not, you know, by yourself the only, you know, interpreter of your experience. You drop back into the community that you're in and say, hey guys, this is what's coming up for me. Do you guys, how does that feel? Does that align with everyone else's heart? And when we vet our psychedelic experiences through community, what we're going to find is that the community always brings it back to love, connection. And if you're by yourself, you become a demagogue. You become the messiah figure. You become the special one that you want to be able to use your kind of wisdom to manipulate other people. So I think you rightly bring up the shadow side of psychedelics, which is this: can these medicines be used to manipulate? Oh, of course. We've seen this. We've seen some of the best kind of leaders in the psychedelic research kind of be sucked in by sexual, you know, by sexuality, by using the medicine as a way to find connection with a female and then exploit them and use their power over them. And so we've seen these sexual violations that in you know in the last 5 6 years we've seen this in the psychedelic space. The answer is not no psychedelics. The answer is we need the power of community. You should not be alone therapist doing one-on-one psychedelics with a female. That should never happen. This stuff is too important for us to we need the ethics around this, and we need the power of community to be able to vet some of this psychedelic experiences. So thank you for that wisdom and for that kind of, hey, psychedelics are not the answer by themselves. Community to me is, and psychedelics can be a helpful tool when done in a communal framework.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we talk a lot about that here at the Flourish Academy. I think, you know, there's a defense mechanism called fawning. You know, there's fight, flight, and freeze, but also fawn. And some people, in the presence of a shaman or the presence of someone who's seen as a guru or a leader, they may be violated and then fawn and, you know, tolerate the abuse, not report the abuse, not go to the community. And so we get back to embodiment, right? If we can be fully embodied, well, I mean, none of us, I think, are fully embodied at all moments, but do our best to embody ourselves both as quote unquote leaders, right? If we are leaders or creating ceremonies or facilitating, and also as those participating in those ceremonies to make sure that we are not getting into our own traumas and fawning or freezing or doing these things that leave us open to be victimized as well. So much, but yeah, the community aspect of it, I think you're absolutely right. It's the I like to say that psychedelics are like Dumbo's magic feather, right? They help give us the confidence to fly, to heal, but it's all within us. We don't need psychedelics to heal. You know, they sometimes, I like to say, I forget how you phrased it before, about the monkey mind. You know, they turn down the ego, they turn down the volume on our ego for a little while so that we can tap into our spirit, into our intuition, and really be able to hear the voice of spirit so that we can get that guidance and move deeper into our healing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I I just really want, you know, for me, this is about connection and vulnerability. That's really what we're missing. And so, you know, whatever we put into that, whether breath work or nature connectedness or, you know, or plant medicine, right? Whether that's cannabis, like we've done some really powerful cannabis circles, and you know, the work of Daniel McQueen out of Denver in his book Psychedelic Cannabis: Therapeutic Methods and Unique Blends to Treat Trauma and Transform Consciousness. This is one of the best book on psychedelics I've ever read, and it has no mention of any other substance besides cannabis. And yet, what he talks about in the book, Psychedelic Cannabis, is the power of the ritualized container, about working with groups together. And so, for me, cannabis is actually a really, really important tool. My wife and I use it a lot for our marriage. We use it intentionally. We set intentions. We will, use it to say, okay, hey, I want to talk about something, but I don't want I don't want our defenses to come up right away, right? Because we develop, and I knew her. I mean, I'm 53. I met her when I was 13 and was smitten, fell in love at 13. It was like, I need to be around that energy, that loving, nurturing energy. My body just was like that, at 13, and I just was smitten by her. And so we use, and yet we develop these patterns with each other. So we use cannabis intentionally, and there's a certain blend we use, right? So McQueen talks about these very high THC strains of sativas can be really anxiety producing. And so, he talks about when you blend them with an indica, more of an embodied piece, and then bring in a third strain like a hybrid. When you blend those three, you have the uplift psychedelic of the sativa, the embodiment grounding of the indica, and then this heart opening. And you blend those three and do one or two puffs. The design isn't to get so blasted. The design is to get a bit light so that our defenses don't come up during these conversations. So my wife and I will sit and say, let's do a 45-minute conversation with a little bit of cannabis where we can bring our hearts out, and I can hold space, and I can listen to what you're seeing, what you're saying without reactions, and I can feel it, and then say, hey, what need is not being met right now? How am I not hearing you? What do I need to feel? And so for us, we use some of that. We use some of these tools. But anyways, you don't have to use them, but there are other non-medicines that techniques that can help you get out of your head and into your body so you can feel, heal, and be known.
Yes, we've actually had Daniel McQueen here at the Flourish Academy speaking about psychedelic cannabis. So you can find that
Wow,
in the
that's
replays
awesome,
if you're
folks. I
interested in hearing
recommend
about
people
that.
go back to that. That's awesome.
All right, well, it looks like Jordan is on the phone. Is there anybody else? We have a few minutes left. If there's anybody else who wants to come up or ask a question, has any reflections, now's the time to raise your hand. Peg, you had offered to the Flourish Academy that you were going to give a discount. You
Yes.
want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yep. So if anyone wants to sign up for a group, a co-ed or a men's group or a women's group, it doesn't matter. We've got all three options. We are offering a $500 discount for anyone, and it's be good for 7 days from now. So you can go on. It's a $500 discount, and these things we are trying to make them as accessible as possible, and we are trying to price these experiences. But we use therapists, and we try to pay them what their kind of the going rate is. And we use therapists and facilitators trained in our program, so that in Canada, at least in British Columbia, we are working with insurance providers to be able to get coverage for your 12-week program. So if you have extended medical here in Canada and you want to be able to submit that, our program can do that, and we get about 85% coverage through extended health. So that's why we use therapists, but that means it's costly, right? They're running these groups, and they are bringing their skill set in on how to create these safe containers. So the cost is, and then it has a 3-day retreat, right? So the whole cost is about $2,900, $2,950, I think, but we're offering a $500 discount for anyone through the Flourish Academy that wants to sign up for a group. Men, women, doesn't matter. So just put it in there. You can say Flourish Academy discount, and we will send you a code for that discount. We would love to have you in some of the groups that are launching in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow, Peg, that's a really generous discount. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Well, is
Peg,
there anything else? Oh, go
is it
ahead.
okay if can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go for it.
Hey, Peg, and I'm just trying to form my words because it's a big question for me anyway. But something that I acknowledge is, and in my experience, and even what you alluded to, is how difficult it is for men to be vulnerable, especially with other men, and that certainly is my experience. Even though I've, you know, uh, willingly venture down this road of evolution and healing, it is so hard to connect with men. And it's like there's something inside of me, like an insidious beast that is actively preventing me from overcoming that barrier. And I'm curious if you have any insight into that, like what it is, or culturally or somatically, that has been sort of birthed and grown within the masculine, and any ways that you found to walk toward healing in that area, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brandon. It's a beautiful question. And I think a lot of men do not feel safe with other men. I think if you think about our experience in our bodies, right? So our first experience is with our fathers. And if we don't have a father that knows how to hold space for uncomfortable emotions and to be present with his own feelings, and then be able to sit with the discomfort of a child's feelings, what most of us have experienced is men that are so disembodied. Their fathers are so disembodied, right? It's only the mother that creates these safe containers. So men get trained to go, oh, men, they're not really safe. My dad's disengaged. All he does is work and drink beer and watch this show, right? I mean, I can't bring it up. It's just like, come on, buddy, just keep going. It's like there's no emotional connection for a lot of men with their fathers. And then they encounter school and sports. And so the next group of men is you're with this really competitive kind of sport world, and you're told you're not enough, you're not picked, you're not fast enough, you're not whatever. And so that becomes another safe, an unsafe place. Then we move into high school and we have kind of groups of guys, and there's all this banter and kind of one-upmanship as we kind of jockey for attention of women. And so now it's another competitive. So just think about all the training that men have had in our culture that have told them this isn't safe. And now I'm saying, hey, let's get a group of men together. And they're like, nope. Why would I do that? Because all the groups of men I've been around has said to me, I'm not enough. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. I'm whatever. It's all these narratives, right? And so your body is saying to you, nope, there's no way I would ever do that. And I think that's why a structured community with men, like a gathering group, which has an intentional premise to it that says we are all here to learn and grow, to not fix each other, to not therapize each other, but to hold space for uncomfortable emotions and to let them to be able to be felt by a community. That is the presupposition that you need to have coming into a gathering group. Because if you don't align with that, this isn't the place for you, right? So I just want to acknowledge how many people have this reticence to be seen by other men. Men have not typically been safe for women for sure, and for other men, right? So I just acknowledge that as a huge barrier that we need to overcome in our culture. But if we can find these safe communities and if we can create them, the power to transform, to actually be seen by other men and to be held by other men in tender, safe ways is incredibly corrective and nervous system and a somatic experience for men. And so it doesn't matter where you're listening from. You could be anywhere. If you can get on a plane and get to Vancouver, Canada, then you can be part of a gathering group and come out. We'll pick you up. We'll bring you to the retreat center, and we'll give you a beautiful 3-day experience as part of your gathering group community. So, thanks for just kind of honoring that question, Brandon. I get where that's coming from. That makes a lot of sense. Why you do not feel safe with men. Yeah.
I have a story, just a quick one. My first men's group, it's so funny that Peg and Brandon, I feel like my upbringing was very similar to yours. I was involved in Promise Keepers in the 90s, and I grew up in the church and all of that. And in my first men's group,
Oh, you went silent there.
that's a
Oh,
cough. In
okay.
my oh,
I think he's coughing. Hmm.
All of a sudden, I got something stuck in my throat. In my first men's group, there was this guy who looked like the prom king, right? He looked like the guy that used to bully me in high school. And we sat around this circle and everybody was sharing, and he was talking about how insecure he felt in high school. And now, just to be clear, he wasn't actually the guy I knew from high school, but he looked a lot like him. He had that same kind of archetype, right? And he's sharing about his insecurities, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, you look like the guy that bullied me. How is it that
Hmm.
you, who seemed like you were so good looking and built and seemed like you had it all together, the prom queen and all that, and you were having the same exact insecurities and struggles that I was as like the comic book nerd that everybody
Hmm.
picks on.
Hmm.
And it was a huge shift in my life to recognize that it wasn't just me or people like me or people that look like me that were experiencing that it was really a universal thing, that all men were really going through a lot of the same struggles, at least on an archetypal level, even if they manifested differently. And that in and of itself was so healing for me, just to hear him expressing the same exact feelings that I was having. So I think that's another, an important reason why it's so healing to just get vulnerable with other men. And then you
Hmm.
find, and I think that's why I learned to kind of lead with vulnerability, in that sense of like just opening the room with a vulnerable share,
Hmm.
because I know that it almost gives permission
Yeah.
and lets others know that it's safe. You can be vulnerable here, and you're safe in that vulnerability.
Mm. Yeah, beautifully said, Danny. I thank you so much for how you've led this conversation today. You've really modeled kind of the tone of what I think is really needed in our world right now. And so rather than this being kind of, oh, listen to the words that are on this clubhouse, it's like listen to the tone in which these men are talking to one another. They're allowing a safe space to happen with one another. And so oh, just thank you so much for your leadership, Danny, in this. I just feel a deep connection with you, and I just feel your heart, in your life right now. And I mean, I would love to have you in a gathering group, man. It'd be so fun to do this work alongside of you. So, man, we should chat off air if you want, but I just really appreciate your leadership in this, Danny. It's been really gorgeous.
Thank you so much. And Peg, I appreciate you holding space for me personally during this room, and just all of the wisdom and value that you brought to this room. It was really such a great conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Danny, and I thank you for all you guys that you people, because there's more than just men on this call, but thank you for tuning in and saying, hey, this is an important conversation we need to have. And imagine, can you imagine a movement of men that is centered around vulnerability and openness and tenderness, rather than macho masculinity and kind of some promise that I'm going to be the head of the home. I mean, it just makes me angry that those kind of movements captured thousands and thousands of people in the 90s. And I think we're still suffering with the downline of some of those religious movements that re-entrenched patriarchy for another generation. So what if we could break that down? And what if we could begin to say, hey, the only way we are going to heal as men is by getting in touch with the balance of our femininity as men, right? Like my indigenous brothers and sisters say, the eagle has the best balance of two wings, because the two wings allow them to fly. The one is the masculine and the other is the feminine. And it's when they work in tandem that we can really soar and begin to see from not just the ground, but we can see from spirit height, right? So we need to bring back the divine feminine within our life as men. And that's this tender, vulnerable, open, caring, nurturing, holding one another as men. And that's most men are scared of that. Like, what? We can't hold each other. Oh, men have held each other for hundreds of thousands of years. Whether it's hunter gatherers or hunting parties that go out on a mission together to go bring back food. We sat around a fire and told each other stories and held those in sacred connection with one another, you know? So we need to get back into circles. We need to get back into connection. And that's my number one passion in life. And that's what I'll be doing the rest of my life is building safe containers for people to transform.
Beautiful, beautiful work. You know, you're saying, what if we change that culture? We are changing it
Yeah,
by
yeah.
having this room, by having these conversations, by having these groups, by just being vulnerable with each other. We are changing it. We are being the change we want to see in the world. And I just noticed Severiano is up on stage. Peg, do you have a few more minutes for
Yeah,
his question?
sure. Yeah.
Awesome. What's up, Rob?
Oh, Grand Rising from sunny Sacramento. I'm really grateful for this conversation. It is very timely as I'm going to be taking some of this information and use it in practice. I'm going on a snow trip with my son and my father on Friday up to the mountain, and I think um, I've had some issues with my dad before in the past. We've had physical altercations, and those stem from my inability to communicate, and it all kind of blew up in a big physical fight. But yeah, we're going on this trip, and it's going to be me, my son who's 16, and my dad who's 60. So it'll be a really powerful time to have these kinds of conversations. So I really just appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared. Danny, your openness is always loved and appreciated as well. I think I resonate with that toxic masculinity of being the provider and feeling less than if you're not able to provide in such a way. So really just appreciate everything that was said today, and it all resonated heavily. So love you guys, and I love this room, and look forward to more spaces like this.
Oh, what a beautiful vision to do with your father, and for you to take this radical act of, moving from violence to connection. I mean, you were doing that in an act of going on this snow trip with your son and dad, but you were doing that for our planet. You are doing this small little act is not small. It's revolutionary. You are leaning into uncomfort with your father and say, there's part of you that wants to cut him out of your life and say, I will never be around that man because this is what he did to me and here's how we enter. But instead, you're saying, no, I choose to invite him in for this journey with my son, and I want to make this intentional, and I want to have conversations that are more than just about sports and whatever. I want to have conversations about the heart, so my son can see me and his grandfather and his father speaking from the heart and being vulnerable without trying to fix one another. So I just want to bless you and just say that you are taking a radical act of intentional connection on this trip, and the universe wants to honor that. So what a beautiful human you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg. I really appreciate that.
Gotta love all the love. Well, once again, Peg, thank you so much for spending this time with us and just downloading all that beautiful wisdom. I've pinned the website for gathering groups to the top
Mhm.
of the page. So if you're interested in checking out Peg's programs, please give that a link. And thank you all for being here. Tomorrow is Microdosing 101. And then on Friday, we have Psychedelics 101. So don't miss those rooms. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thanks
Take
so
care,
much, Dan.
everyone.
Thanks.